At first, the Americans laughed. They looked at the British jet and shook their heads. It was big. It was heavy. It was slow. It looked like a flying brick. It didn't have supersonic speed. It didn't have stealth technology. It looked like something from a museum. This was the Blackburn Buccaneer S-2. During a major joint exercise, the U.S. Navy controllers weren't worried. They had the most powerful radar in the world. They had the F-14 Tomcat, a fighter designed to kill anything in the sky. It's just a low-level target, they said. We'll spot it miles away. Piece of cake. But then the timeline started slipping. The radar screens were empty. The interceptors were looking in the wrong place. The radio calls were late. And suddenly, a shadow roared over the top of the American carrier. The Buccaneer hadn't just survived. It had flown right through the entire U.S. Navy defense fleet without being touched. It had simulated a nuclear strike on the carrier and vanished before the Americans could even spill their coffee. The laughter stopped instantly. How did an old, slow British jet humiliate the most powerful navy on Earth? Welcome to Hidden Valor. This is the story of the flying banana that proved speed isn't everything. To understand why the Buccaneer was so dangerous, you have to understand why it was built. In the 1950s, the Royal Navy faced a nightmare. The Soviet Union was building massive cruisers with incredible air defenses. If Britain sent normal jets to attack them, they would be shot down by missiles long before they got close. High altitude was suicide. The sky was filled with radar and death. So, the British engineers made a radical choice. If we can't fly over the radar, we will fly under it. They built the Buccaneer S-2. It wasn't designed to be pretty. It was built like a tank. It had a rotating bomb bay door to reduce drag. It had massive engines. But most importantly, it was built to fly low. And when I say low, I don't mean 500 feet. I mean wavetop height. The British pilots didn't train to fly in the clear blue sky. They trained over the freezing, rough waters of the North Sea. They learned to fly at 50 feet, sometimes even lower, at 600 miles per hour. At that altitude, the spray from the ocean would coat the windshield with salt. The U.S. Navy didn't understand this philosophy. Their doctrine was different. They believed in layered defense. They thought their radars would see everything. They forgot one thing. Radar has a hard time seeing things that are hiding in the waves. The exercise began. The U.S. Navy turned on their billion-dollar radars. They scanned the horizon. They waited for the blip. But radar over the ocean has a problem. It's called sea clutter. Waves are messy. They reflect radar energy. They create noise on the screen. To a radar operator, the ocean surface looks like static on a TV. The Buccaneer pilots knew this. They flew right down into the clutter. They hugged the curvature of the earth. They used the waves as a shield. On the American screens, the Buccaneer didn't look like a jet. It looked like a wave. It looked like noise. It looked like nothing. Meanwhile, the U.S. fighters, the mighty F-14s, were patrolling high above. They were burning fuel, waiting for a target that refused to appear. The American controllers started to get nervous. Where are they? I have nothing on the scope. By the time the radar finally picked up a solid contact, it was too late. The Buccaneer wasn't 50 miles away. It was 5 miles away. At that speed, 5 miles is nothing. It's seconds. The Buccaneer didn't just beat the radar. It beat the pilots. The British knew they couldn't outrun an F-14. The Tomcat was Mach 2 capable. The Buccaneer was subsonic. In a dogfight, the Buccaneer was dead meat. So, they refused to dogfight. The British pilots used timing. They would approach the carrier group from weird angles. They wouldn't fly in a straight line. They would hold off, waiting for the American fighters to turn away or go for refueling. They played a game of cat and mouse. But this time, the mouse was invisible. In the American cockpits, the frustration was building. The pilots were tired. Staring at the ocean for hours is exhausting. Their fuel was getting low. "We have to return to the tanker," a Tomcat pilot would say. That was the moment the Buccaneer struck. While the defenders were distracted, refueling, or repositioning, the British jets would dash in. They arrived before the fight even began. In one famous run, a Buccaneer flew so low that it passed underneath the radar coverage of the American ships completely. It popped up right next to the carrier, simulated a weapon release, and peeled away. The American sailors on deck looked up in shock. They hadn't heard an alarm. They hadn't heard a missile launch. They just saw the fat British jet roar past them. The message was clear: you are sunk. The debriefing was brutal. The U.S. Navy had to admit that their system had failed. They had focused so much on high-tech missiles and supersonic threats that they forgot about the basics. They forgot that a determined enemy, flying aggressively low, could slip through the cracks. The Buccaneer S-2 forced the U.S. Navy to rethink everything. They realized that defending a fleet wasn't just about firepower. It was about endurance. The Buccaneer didn't beat them with violence. It beat them with patience. It forced the defenders to stay on high alert for hours, burning out their crews and their fuel. It was a lesson in asymmetric warfare. You don't need a better plane to win. You just need a better strategy. American pilots stopped making jokes about the flying banana. They started asking the British pilots for advice. How do you fly that low without crashing? They asked. The answer was simple: discipline. British crews accepted the danger. They flew with a level of precision that few others dared to match. The Blackburn Buccaneer is gone now. It was retired years ago, but its legacy remains. It proved that in the world of warfare, looks can be deceiving. The Americans saw an old, slow, ugly jet. The British saw a weapon of stealth and timing. The exercise didn't change the war, but it changed the mindset. It reminded the world's superpower that you can never get too comfortable. Because somewhere just above the waves, hidden in the spray, there might be a shadow you didn't see coming. And by the time you hear the roar, it's already too late. If you enjoyed this story of British grit outsmarting American tech, hit that like button. Could you fly at 50 feet over a rough ocean? Let us know in the comments.